So we empathize with the challenges that you're all facing when you work remotely during this health pandemic. We're facing the same challenges. It's extremely difficult to facilitate visa sponsorship and to welcome our new visitors in this remote work environment. So we certainly empathize with the challenges that you're facing. And this presentation is designed to address these challenges as we work together through them and experience a shared goal of facilitating the visa sponsorship and the experience of the and the contributions of our international faculty and researchers who come here to Colombia. So on the next screen. So this is the agenda. We're going to be covering briefly an overview of the executive orders and proclamations, which are still in effect, the status of US consular posts, and a bit on international travel, suggested pre-arrival guidance for your department, as well as for you to communicate to your scholars, an overview of campus resources and how contingency plans of these units may impact the experience of your scholars. And then we'll end with a Q&A. And we've tried, like I said, to incorporate as many questions as possible into this presentation. So with the executive orders and proclamations, and here I'm speaking specifically about ones that would impact our J-1 and J-2 exchange visitors. These are largely targeted to those who are or who may plan to be outside the US. There are COVID-19 related travel bans whereby entry to the US is banned if one has been to any of these countries within 14 days prior to the entry date of the US. And these countries currently include China, Iran, Brazil, the European Schengen area, UK, and Ireland. And that particular section has asterisks because the next screen is going to discuss that in more detail. And we don't have specific information when any of these bans will be lifted. And there's another restriction in place right now, which is for non-essential travel at the Canada-Mexico border with our country, which has recently been extended to August 21st, and which seems to be extended monthly. So we would anticipate that also would be extended further. And that pertains to essential travel, and non-essential travel. So employment and study in the US is considered essential travel. And the official government websites for each of these countries clearly delineate what is the difference between essential travel and non-essential travel. And these orders and proclamations are in addition to any other bans or quarantines that may be in place in the destination countries as well when it comes to travel. So the US State Department has announced that certain consular posts will process applications for what's called a national interest exception to the 14-day travel ban for certain travelers from the European Schengen area, UK, and Ireland. And among those that are eligible to apply, in addition to F1 students, are J1 and J2 categories of professor, research scholar, short-term scholar, student, and student intern. So even the language of this exception refers to academics, the information we have thus far is that it's restricted to academics in the J-1 exchange visitor program and not the other academics in employment-based visa categories like the H-1B at this time. But the actual information would be clearly delineated on the website of that specific consular posts. The consular post that issues the exception and that advises on the process and determines the validity duration of the exception. So the application process is listed on the website. It's not something that's done through ISSO. And thus far, from what we've heard, it seems to be a smooth process handled remotely. And the approval, it seems, comes in the form of an email notification that they print out to carry with them when they travel, or a notation on the visa stamp itself if they're applying for an entry visa concurrently. It's not something that's available at all consulates, just specific ones as listed on their website. So it's not, there's no list that ISSO has of these consular posts. And as a reminder, J-1 and J-2s, when they travel, they need an unexpired entry visa, unexpired DS-2019 with a valid ISSO travel signature if we're the visa sponsor, and this exception in hand if they're coming from this particular region for reentry. And we'll discuss more about travel guidance later on in the presentation. So the next we have a proclamation suspending entry for Chinese graduate students and postgraduate researchers deemed to be connected to China's military fusion strategy. So a few things here. It uses the phrase postgraduate researchers, which is not to be interpreted as specifically postdocs. I think it's broader in scope. And it pertains to J-1 and F-1 visas only at this time, and not H-1Bs or other visas currently. And basically, it's impacted by factors such as the source of funding, whether the postgraduate researcher is or was holding an employment or research affiliation with a Chinese institution deemed by the US government to be connected to the Chinese military. Our government has purposefully not made public which funding sources or which institutions are sources of concern, so it's not something that ISSO would be able to predict in advance. And we don't know, we can't provide guidance on how the determination is made, but for certain, we're not the ones making that determination, and it's government officials to do this review process. And we continue to process our F-1 and J-1 visa certificates, those I-20s and DS-2019s routinely. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Jimena Corley, for the next couple screens.
Hi, so we're going to talk about visual compliance. Visual compliance is Colombia's online screening tool. This allows you to quickly determine whether an individual's name or their home institution is on the restricted party list. At the moment, ISSO provides interim assistance to the Export Control Office at Columbia University by conducting the visual compliance screening for all J-1 sponsor requests. As I said earlier, this system allows us to check and screen the names of individuals and their home institutions with a list of restricted visitors and institutions. If there is a hit while the screening is done, Colombia's Export Control Office will reach out to the department directly to advise on any risks or pathways. This may include some solutions such as creating compliance plans or mandatory training for the lab. Or there have been times where the invitation may need to be rescinded. In these cases, we have found that it never goes well. So we highly recommend that your department does the visual compliance screening prior to the invitation and prior to ISSO receiving the application. Next slide. Those admitted to the US as B1 or B2 or ESTA visa waiver programs, so these are visitors for business or business or tourism, are not eligible for university ID or unis. They're also not eligible for the visiting scholar or scientist designation or appointment, academic appointment. The US immigration regulations really require that the nature of the activity that one enters into the US be considered when they're entering. So many times that the most appropriate would probably be the J-1 visa. Decisions regarding what type of visa should be made should not be made by the proposed visitor because it is easier for them to enter on the B1, B2, or ESTA because they already have it or they don't have to apply for a visa rather than applying for another type of visa that is more appropriate. Next slide. So the status of the US consular posts and international travel. This is definitely a hot topic at the moment, as we're seeing things to kind of finally, after many, many months, finally kind of opening and up a little bit. U.S. embassies and consulates are resuming routine visa services on a post-by-post basis. So if you have a scholar who is abroad and wants to re-enter and they need to apply for a visa, please make sure that they are checking with their consulate to see if they're open yet, and if they have what their appointment it looks like. We are seeing that some consulates are experiencing delays, or some are not opening just yet. US consular posts are also the source for guidance for those who are eligible for the national interest exception that Jane just spoke about, or so for those with COVID-related exceptions for medical professionals. So if any of your scholars have any questions about that, they should definitely be reaching out to their consular post. We are advising all scholars in all categories that that international travel is coming with a high risk at the moment, and we're happy to talk through the risks, but to be aware that we're not really recommending travel and advising them about why it is such a high risk at this point due to embassy closures, COVID-19, and then just because of the executive orders that keep coming in that we're not sure what can be coming next. If you have a J-1 scholar who is currently in the United States and is unable to return to their home country during their grace period, the Department of State is recommending that J-1 scholars reach out to their home country embassies, as they are in some cases are able to provide some sort of guidance, charter planes, and other options for the scholar. We also would like to be notified as well, especially for those who are either not hearing back from their consulate or have not been able to depart the US. And we will try to assist in some way if possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll go through the next screen, but before I do go through it, I do want to address a very important concern which many of you raised in advance when you RSVP'd, and that's about whether visiting scholars, those independent researchers of any visa status, including US citizens, permanent residents, anybody who's coming with a designation of visiting scholar, can be invited to campus this fall as part of the university's reopening plan. And our office received an email, so it's in writing, from Professor Katz-Nelson that there will be no university-wide policy that prohibits these invitations. Decisions on whether or not to bring a visiting scholar and when to start implementing that, those decisions are to be made at the school and individual department levels. So these presentation screens, from here on out for the rest of the presentation, are intended to provide you with guidance as to on various factors as your department considers whether or not to invite visiting scholars to campus, and if you do, how to do it appropriately. So keep in mind that the U.S. State Department considers and always reminds us as J-1 visa sponsors that the health, safety, and welfare of the J-1 and J-2 exchange visitors are of utmost importance. Our ISSO director, David Ostell, has informed me that Melanie Burnitz has confirmed visiting scholars, those independent researchers, are to follow the same COVID-19 processes to access the university campus as all other researchers that are on appointment. So please do include visiting scholars in any return to work guidance or communications that you're providing to the other researchers and faculty in your department. And I do want to mention that visiting scholars, again, those independent researchers not on appointment, they do not receive university-wide emails from those news blasts from the Provost's office, Columbia Health, University Life offices, because their unis are coded, and this is something we're not able to change there for a reason. They're coded as visitors and not as employees or student or staff unis. And so because they're coded as visitors, they're not getting those main news blasts. So we at the ISSO certainly do our part in communicating university guidance to this visiting scholar community, but ultimately the resource for information and guidance is the academic department that has issued the invitation. So please do keep this in mind in your outreach about policies and resources to please include these visiting scholars in that guidance, because it's the department's responsibility to direct all scholars to the university's COVID-19 related resources and to direct them on how to appropriately utilize the safety measures. I'm going to also say on that last sentence down there that Columbia University, the ISSO, as J-1 visa sponsor, is obligated by J-1 regulations to report to the State Department any hospitalization of 48 hours or more. So if you come to learn that any of your J-1 scholars or researchers or students are hospitalized for COVID-19 or broken arm or anything, let us know, because that is something that we need to inform the department just so that they're aware of any hospitalization that is 48 hours or more. So another thing to keep in mind, which is another premise of J-1 visa sponsorship, is that it's for a specific program objective, and that includes, by federal regulation, in-person exchanges. So therefore, the J-1 scholar must be aware in advance of arrival to the extent possible that if there's any changes to the invitation or if the invitation has been impacted in any way by COVID-19 contingency plans, the J-1 exchange visitor should know of these changes in advance. The J-1 exchange visitor, as much as possible, should not be surprised about levels of access, the levels of the ability to do their program objective upon arrival. And we certainly understand the fluid nature of processes and protocols, and things change. As we know, who would have thought last semester would turn out the way it did? So certainly there is the unexpected, but to the extent possible, please ensure that prior to arrival, your incoming J-1 exchange visitors are aware of any contingency plans or impact to their program objectives. And then if their labs or research materials are restricted, just please make sure that they're aware of this. They should understand any limits on the availability of the faculty sponsor. I think maybe is it on the next screen? Sorry. Oh no, sorry, okay, sorry, go back. So yes, they should understand, thank you very much, the availability or any limits on the availability of the faculty sponsor and their mentor. Will the faculty sponsor be on campus? If not, what's the communication plan? Make sure your scholar's aware of that plan. Is your department office closed or holding limited hours? Make sure your scholars are aware of any office closures, the contingency plan of accessing the department administration. And as per State Department directive, and this is in writing recently, that instructional positions for new incoming J-1 arrivals must include a formal in-person component to their job duties. And this guidance was issued by the State Department in writing, and it pertains to their concern over classroom learning. And there's been a lot of press in the news, and you've probably heard it, about regarding our government's concern about new students coming in for purely remote classes. Well, the same concern has been raised by the State Department about new J-1 instructional faculty. So there must be some sort of formal, not just saying hi in the around campus, some sort of formal in-person job duty for new, not current, but the new ones coming in, the new course instructors And the J-1 instructor must be aware of this expectation. And certainly the State Department understands that job duties change throughout the semester, and as things progress out of health and safety concerns that might be pulled back, that in-person component, and that's fine. They understand that. But if they're coming here to provide classroom instruction on the J, the State Department is reminding sponsors that there should be some kind of formal in-person component to their job, whether it's office hours or a set staff meeting or hybrid instruction. And if you have a question about a specific case, please do reach out to us. And again, this pertains to incoming J-1s, instructors. So in terms of resources, Columbia University resources, ISSO is the source for guidance on immigration and visa matters. So please use us. We always tell this to our international community. Don't use your friends, the media, a faculty member that once held an immigration status prior. We're here, we try our best to be available on many different, from emails, phones. Our team really takes that seriously. So please do utilize us, encourage your international faculty, researchers, scholars to use us as a resource. We have our own ISSO COVID-19 Hub, which is our own webpage for resources and guidance and frequently asked questions. So please do read through that on the ISSO website. If you find a question that is not covered there, that is important to you, please do reach out to me. I can have that added. Your suggestions certainly will benefit our community. So please do reach out if you have any suggestions for us to add or edit that page. Columbia's global travel website provides guidance on the university policy regarding travel. And Columbia has its own COVID hub for guidance on a safe return to campus. And it's really important that you read that COVID-19 hub university-wide that provides the back to work, reopening campus guidance. So please do, that's a big takeaway for you to read that guidance. It refers to things like health and safety training and acknowledgements, which must be completed by researchers before they enter campus or return to campus. And then in terms of those visiting scholars, those independent researchers, in the event that any of those protocols are through RASCL, which they're not able to access because their visitor uni doesn't allow that, you may want to consider printing out a hard copy of that and have your visiting scholars do that in hard copy, and they keep a copy at their end, you do at your end, to ensure department compliance for that very important step in returning to campus. And that website also refers to the COVID-19 Symptom Check app, which will facilitate on-campus access. I believe it's for 24 hours and is completed daily for anyone coming to campus. So if, for example, your visiting scholars are not able to download the app because they don't have Duo or for whatever reason, they are able to complete that symptom check online through that website. There's a web link there. We tested it. They are able to do that, and they would still follow that same protocol if they're going to be on campus. So do direct your scholars to the updated COVID-19 guidance that is centrally located there, and also the specific contingency plans and COVID-19 related web guidance for different divisions of the university. And these are three common ones. One is the ID Center, and you may want to reach out to the ID Center directly, especially if you're a department that has so many visiting scholars. Just to streamline the process, you may want to reach out to the ID Center directly because they are not doing walk-ins. So the information I received maybe about a week or so ago from the ID Center is that if somebody wants to get an ID, here I'm talking about scholars and those visiting scholars, those independent researchers. If they want to get an ID card, the process is that they activate their uni, which is provided by ISSO. They have to upload their photo the same way students have to upload it, new hires have to upload their photo. Visiting scholars will also have to do that. They'll then receive an email confirmation from the ID center when their photo has been approved. And then when they arrive on campus, so not until they arrive on campus, they should email the ID center, and a woman named Doris Graham Foreman, and I have that information. I think her uni is DD5. DD5. She is going to be the point person for visiting scholars when it comes to arranging a time to actually pick up their ID card. They'll have to pay with a credit card, or your department can use their chart string. And then they pick up the ID card in person, unless you want to do it for them. I kind of assumed that might not be, but somebody has to pick up the ID card at a designated time. So it's not like they can just walk in and get their photo taken for the ID card. So you may want to reach out directly to the ID center just to be on the same page before your folks arrive on campus. The university libraries have a very helpful page on the reopening of libraries and their contingency plans, as well as does the Dodge Fitness Center. So please refer your scholars to those as well. And lastly, and this is very off topic, but I just wanted to give a heads up for an email we're going to be sending out. Just as an FYI, it's nothing that's required, but we're going to be sending out information to departments later this month regarding a company called English 3, which provides English language evaluations for prospective J1s. As such, an evaluation of English proficiency is required in advance of the DS 2019 issuance. So if your department is unhappy with having to do it in-house, or is looking to learn more about an alternate resource of a third party that can do it for you, we'll be sending out information to all departments on this. It's a company called English 3, and they conduct and evaluate these interviews themselves. They're done virtually via video on demand. So whenever the scholar is ready, they can just do it automatically. And then the video is available for viewing both by ISSO and the hosting department. I think it costs about $100 or so per person. So, and that can be paid by the incoming scholar or the hosting department. It's not something we would ever force. You know, this company is not something where it's something that's being offered, and we'll be sending out information that you can look into it at your own end, if that is something that helps your department in terms of lifting off that type of part of the process of visa sponsorship for J1s. So here we are. We looked much better pre-COVID, at least I did. But here we are. On our website, we do have our personal emails and phone numbers and links to make an appointment with us, or, you know, so please, we do reach out to scholars to let them know how to contact us. We are working remotely, but we do, you know, there's large group Zoom sessions. We're doing our J1 orientations online. We do one-on-ones with scholars at their request. So please know that just like you, we are ongoing work the best we can remotely. And then the Q&A. So we'll try to take your questions. My colleague Gabriel will read off some of the questions that have come in. Feel free to type them, and my colleagues will assist me in addressing them.
I think the first question came from Joe, and he's asking, is funding from Chinese Scholarship Council considered associated with military? Well,
we'll find out. Yeah, so that's something that I'm not aware of at this point in time, and I'll check with my colleagues Jimena and Colleen. I'm not aware that we know the answer to that, but we'll hear soon because that's like a zillion people.
Vanessa Giardino is asking, would we be breaking a Hipaa rule by informing an outside party about a person's health status or issue?
Sorry, let me, okay.
Oh, it's not available there. It should
That
ask,
again?
would we departments be breaking a Hipaa rule by informing an outside party about a person's health status or issue?
Well, the only thing I'm asking for in this particular presentation was about the hospitalization of a J-1 if they've been hospitalized for 48 hours. I think you'd have to check with OGC on any other questions regarding disclosing any personal information of researchers and scholars. I think that's more of an OGC question. But I do want to, in our website, I think if you go to the department section of our website, there'll be something called Report an Issue. And that is a section of our website which talks about the State Department requirements of things that have to be reported. You know, a death of an exchange visitor, if an exchange visitor is missing, specific, if there's been police action involving a J-1 exchange visitor. And likewise, they themselves are able to report problems, you know, or concerns, which is one of the reasons we're having this presentation. If ever a J-1 arrived and what we're offering at Colombia is not what they signed up for, what they expected, they have the right to report that to the State Department as well. So that seems like an OGC question, although on our website, there's specific guidance that the State Department requires for reporting.
One question is on the national interest exception. Can you tell us what is involved in seeking the national interest exception to the 14-day travel ban? Does the J-1 need a letter from Colombia or from their pending supervisor?
I can chime in on this. Yes, yeah, no problem. So the scholar needs to reach out to their consulate post on their own to find out what is required. If they already have a visa, they would still need to reach out to the consulate post. If they're applying for the visa, then they would then get it notated on their visa. So as far as I'm aware of, there has been no need for a letter from the Columbia University or from their pending supervisor to obtain one of these.
Ratana is asking, if visiting scholars decide to leave the US for research, how long can they be away? And when they return, do they need to go through the same returning to campus protocols with quarantining and taking another getaway test?
Yeah, so there's no, definitely let us know. If somebody's going to be gone, I would say like 30 days or more, let our office know. Let's talk through it together. Let's see what the person's plans are. We should that's definitely worthy of a conversation. But basically, if we're keeping open visa sponsorship, that's because they're still part of the program. They're still going to be pursuing their objectives. And so we want to only cover them, continue to cover their visa sponsorship if they're still part of the program, still expected to return. So no specific time frame that we can provide. There is a special notation that we at the ISSO can give in their CVIS record, which is like an out-of-country functionality that helps alert the State Department that says even though they're abroad for a while, they're still part of our program, we're aware of it. So it's definitely worth a conversation with the ISSO advisor that issued the DS 2019. And then in terms of when they come back, months from now, I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen weeks from now. It's probably a very different landscape, but they definitely would have to follow any return to the US protocols, that quarantines that may be in place, the return to campus revamp. They would all have to follow all of that. As it is now, they would still have to follow that guidance.
JP Paris is asking, could you repeat the name of the person to contact for arranging the CUID request and pick it up? Could you confirm if a staff person can pick up those Colombia ID cards on the J-1 scholars' behalf?
So this is based on my guidance is based on outreach that I made to the ID center, and I found them to be very helpful. And the woman I spoke with, her name is, sorry to look at my notes. I'll type it into the chat. I'll type it into the chat box. That's probably better. So yes, I mean, it seemed as though, and again, I'm speaking for another unit of the university, so take that with a grain of salt, but it did seem that the departments can pick it up on behalf of the scholars. And in fact, when I began that conversation, it seemed that it was the ID center's preference to have the department pick up what they thought was going to be a bunch of visiting scholar ID cards and then disseminate them within the department. But I explained that some departments have like 1 or 2 scholars, others have 50. And so it would have to be, that process would have to be determined on a department by department basis. But I will type into the chat box that person's contact information.
Lauren is asking, can you also speak a bit more about travel restrictions or recommendations for people with expiring J-1 visas, meaning scholars leaving the university?
Does either one of you, my colleagues, want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think I can answer to that. I think what is, so if a scholars program end date is approaching, and it's important to be mindful that after their program end date, they have 30 days to stay lawfully in the US, and this grace period is for them to organize their affairs and come back home. If someone is already in contact with you and is concerned about flights or anything like that, please contact us. This person should also be aware that their own country, embassy, or consulate is a source for them to learn more about guidelines or policies for them to return back home, or even if their home country embassy is offering charter flights, for example. So definitely first contact us, let us know, talk to your ISSO liaison and to this person's advisor. But yeah, in every country, they may have their own restrictions or quarantine policies. So this is a conversation that it should definitely happen with the person's advisor. And Julie Stevens asking, are Fulbright scholars subject to everything you just discussed? If so, has Fulbright been informed of what Colombia is or is not able to offer currently, and what COVID policies and restrictions we have in place?
So I'm going to also turn this over to my colleague Colleen, who facilitates the Fulbright component of a lot of our team's work. But just to be mindful that Fulbrights can come in many different affiliations. So we're not talking about Fulbright students here in this presentation. We're talking about the Fulbright appointees, or more commonly, the visiting scholars. So I'm going to have Colleen respond to that.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So for Fulbright scholars, they are treated as visiting scholars. That's how they are coded into the system. So everything Jane just spoke about with the visiting scholars also applies to the Fulbrighters. The most recent applications that we've received aren't starting until the spring, so we don't know what exactly will be the circumstances by then. The ISSO has not reached out to Fulbright to inform them. If you have made an invitation to a visiting scholar who is a Fulbrighter, I do recommend that you reach out to them directly to let them know the circumstances, what will be with your department. They, again, should get the communications that we give to all of our visitors with the general university information, but for anything department specific, I recommend that you be in touch with them. If you have any questions about any of the Fulbrighters, please feel free to reach out to me. and we can discuss their specific situation if you have any concerns. Thank you.
So I think that's it for the questions that have come up, but we, are available at any time. Please do reach out to us, and as the semester begins, if you find that there are common questions that your department has or that we can add to our outreach, as we also welcome scholars to campus, things we can incorporate into our own communications, into our website. We certainly welcome that type of suggestions, and we certainly wish you all well through this. It's a pleasure working with you all personally and remotely. So I appreciate you taking your time and joining us today.